Okay, so good evening, everybody. My name is Arthur Franzak. I'm the chair of the advisory committee. Let me start by confirming that we have a quorum and the members who are present. Once I do that, I will go over people who are scheduled to be on the agenda, and then we can get going. So again, advisory board members to start with. I believe Kristen Baelish is here. Kristen, please say yes.
Yes.
I did not see Brian get on yet. Brian Bichkowski. Okay, he is not. Michael Huff. Are you there, Mike?
Mike's muted. Hi.
Hey, okay, you're here. Excellent. Jonathan Hurwitz is here.
Yep, here.
Excellent. Jackie Katz.
Here.
And did I see Susan Klein come in? Not yet. Okay, so no Susan. David Lutz, of course. Say hello, David. And Kiara Moore is also here.
Yep, here.
And auditing periodically will be Susan Jacobson, our administrator. Let me quickly go over the agenda tonight and we can check in on our speakers. We're going to start off with a citizen petition by Mr. Rand and a Mr. Haddad. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Are either of those two gentlemen with us? I do not see either of them present. Mr. Rand or Mr. Haddad?
Who's managing the waiting room?
I am.
Okay.
Brian is now here. And okay, yes, I have to jump back and forth here. Okay, so the waiting room is now empty again. Thanks for the reminder. Again, do we have either of the signers of the citizen petition with us this evening? Not yet. Okay, well, we are scheduled to speak to it, so we'll get to that. Mr. Talman, our town administrator, is scheduled to speak at 7-ish p.m. as well. Jay, are you with us yet? Okay, well, let's put this towards the back of the agenda since we do not have any of our guests with us who are going to share their thoughts about it. Blythe, was there something you wanted to share?
Nope, I'm just playing with my
Got it.
sound here. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Okay. So the next item on our agenda is to review the warrant. And I believe Blythe will be helping us to walk through that. The PDF handout of the latest warrant is on the website, the town website, for the meeting. I will try here to share, just to bring it up here on the screen, my copy of it. Here we go. So can you just go ahead and take us through the first few articles, Blythe?
Sure. This is still a draft. I'm waiting to get comments back from town council tomorrow morning so I can update this for the select board's meeting next Tuesday. And so the preamble has been written as it usually is, which is to have the election before town meeting. And right now they're supposed to be switched. So that needs to be addressed. And because Article 1 is the election. Article 2, right now we don't anticipate any unpaid bills this year, so that would be one that we would pass over, take no action. Article 3, there will be transfers. We have not developed a full list yet. The ones that I am anticipating right now are a shortfall in town council expenses. We will not have enough funds for the remainder of the fiscal year, as well as we need to fund the our 5-year full assessment revaluation. We actually should have done it in the fall and didn't. So we need to, we believed pre-pandemic that we were going to need to fund this at this annual town meeting because the work needs to be done at the early end of the next fiscal year. With the pandemic, we're waiting to hear from the DOR whether that will take place or not. So that's up in the air. I'm sure there'll be other transfers. Don't know what they are yet.
Blythe, can I ask a quick question since I'm taking notes? What was the second thing? Could you name it? I heard everything but what it was.
The town's 5-year full revaluation of properties.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's all. That's really all I needed. Thank you.
You're welcome. Article 4 is the compensation schedule. We are planning that as well. This year, the request would be for currently a 0.5% increase in the cost of living rather than 1.5%. That's part of the whole budget strategy. Article 5 is the budget, and we're still working on the final details with that, and the board's set to discuss it again on Tuesday night. Article 6 and Article 7 are new versions of the water and wastewater enterprise fund budgets. I'm proposing that rather than having a separate article for water budget and water capital, that we use the DOR's preferred methodology of scripting this article. And so, one of the reasons I want to use it is because it gives the resident reader of the warrant more information about the budget that they haven't gotten in the past in the warrant, rather than waiting to get to town meeting and see the slide that shows this breakdown. So this is the budget as it is proposed right now for both enterprise funds. The only change I anticipate to these is that we have identified that we will need some additional funds to finish the Holbrook Street Wellfield project. And so I anticipate that on Article 6, we'll fill in the line item for capital outlay to add some funds from retained earnings to make sure we have a contingency to finish that project. And Article 7 is the same strategy, obviously a much simpler budget. The numbers have changed slightly from what I sent Sue on Friday, I think by about $2,000. And this is simply salaries, expenses, and unforeseen. It's pretty straightforward. Article 8 and Article 9 are two articles we always have for funding of capital from various sources. I anticipate we would indefinitely postpone both of those. There's no plans to do any capital expenditures at this point in the year, and we typically don't. Article 10 is the Special Education Reserve Fund that the school committee has proposed. And I understand we're going to meet with Ingrid or the committee at a later date, so we can go over that in more detail. Article 11 is reports. I don't know who wants to report at this point. Article 12 is the Town Government Study Committee's proposal to require that all town meeting warrants be mailed. And I see Jonathan's on the call. I'm sure he can talk about that. Article 13 is revolving funds. We have one to eliminate this year and one to add. So I'm waiting to hear from town council about how exactly we want to word that. But those are all pretty straightforward, and the expenditure limits are not proposed to be changed. Article 14 and 15 are the two typical CPC articles. For the first one is for the administrative expenses, same $15,000 as prior years. And Article 15 is to put 10% in each of the buckets per the CPC law. Again, very straightforward. Article 16, Chapter 90, very straightforward. Article 17, grants, it just allows the board to apply for grants and accept monies, straightforward. And same with Article 18, the surplus property. Article 19 is to take care of some housekeeping in the area of amending the zoning bylaws for to disallow any future two-family homes. And I know that Rich McCarthy can speak more to that. Article 20, residential density in the zoning bylaws is striking some language. I'm probably not the best one to give you all the details on that. And Articles 22 through 27 are all to be struck. The planning board met last night and formally voted to remove those. So they will be taken out. Then Article 28 is the layout of Nichols Way, which is ready to move forward and working through the process. And then currently Article 29 is the citizens petition. So that's a quick overview, and I can go back in any more detail that you would like.
Thank you for the summary. A lot of this seems like it's not really at a place where we could vote for it yet, or vote on it yet, I should say. Were there any specific questions members of the advisory committee had about the articles, their context, and the state of finalization? Yes, Brian, please go ahead.
So the first article you talked about around the additional expenses for the study on the valuation across the town and the council.
Mm-hmm.
What's the relative size of that? And is any of that something that we can clear up with the advisory board reserve?
No, I have to go back and double check with Todd and Don Clark, the assessor, but I think the number is approximately $55,000, maybe a little bit less. And we need to hire an outside firm to provide the work that we are not able to do ourselves, and the level of work to do all of the property inspections that we don't have staff to do on a regular basis. So the question we have right now is the state going to hold us to the schedule, given it's very nearly impossible to get into properties currently, or push it off? So we would anticipate this would be a transfer from free cash.
Okay, thank you, Blythe. David, yes, you had your hand up.
Also, Blythe, when you were talking about Article 1, I heard you say something about switching an article with this one. I didn't.
So the preamble to the warrant describes that Article 1 on the warrant is the election, and the preamble is typically written to say first we'll have the election on the first Tuesday in May, and then we'll have the town meeting. And now currently that's switched. The town meeting is supposed to come before the election. So I just need guidance from town council on how to restructure.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
That's if town meeting actually stays on June 9th. And I'm not sure.
I was going to say the preamble has the dates already wrong. So yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Still we're waiting to figure this out.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Jonathan, yes, please go ahead.
My question, actually, Blythe just touched on it a little bit, which was if there was any discussion of contingency planning if town meeting can't happen on June 9th, what that might look like.
Well, I think there's options. Number one, I think first we need to understand whether the state will allow a large gathering, and when will that be allowed? If say the large gathering was allowed after June 15th, then I think there's a conversation needs to be had about whether we want to try to get the town meeting in the last 2 weeks of the fiscal year. And if not, the state law provides for the town, any town, to apply to have a 1/12 budget approved by the state until you're able to have a town meeting, so 1/12 being each month, and you you were allowed to do that, but you basically are continuing with the same FY20 budget and until a budget is passed different than that. So let's say no gatherings were allowed until, July. That's a step we'll have to take.
Okay. Do we need to ask the budget holders and the department leaders to start doing planning under, I think, a likely assumption that they're going to have to operate on a month-to-month basis with last year's budget? Or is there
Yes, the simplest, in the simplest form, any union contracts, the large part of our budget is salaries, right? And so union contracts, if they called for a 3% increase, would not happen. We would continue to pay employees at the same rate they're paid today. There may be some other contracts that we're due to adjust that we'll have to go back and deal with those for, say, a service or a commodity that we receive that somehow was set to increase. Those will have to be dealt with, and we would pay the schools their portion of the 1/12 budget, and that would continue until we are able to have a town meeting to address it, whatever that budget ends up being.
Understood. And one follow-up question is, what happens to the tax rate? Does the tax rate in that situation remain fixed and not subject to 2.5% increase? If we're operating on last year's budget, is the tax rate the same, or is the tax rate going to be increased?
Oh, as I'm sure you know, the tax rate, the way Proposition 2.5 works, the tax rate doesn't actually get set until after the fall town meeting in late November. So the town will still send out tax bills in beginning of July, due in August, at the same rate. It's called a preliminary tax bill, and we would do that whether we pass the budget in June or we passed it in July. That actually doesn't change. So if the town gets to the fall, and after, if there's any clarity to all of that, we adjust our budget however we do, and that budget includes a 2.5% increase, then tax bills that you get in December, the second two bills of the year would reflect whatever that higher rate is.
Okay, so just for avoidance of doubt and not to be a pessimist, but in worst case scenario, if we're not able to hold town meeting until when the new tax bills would have been sent out, right, would those have a 2.5% increase, or would those remain as they were in last fiscal year?
I think it's going to come to the point where we have to have enough clarity to know what budget we're going to pass and whether or not a 2.5% increase is needed or would be utilized to meet that budget.
Well, I mean, I'm going off of it's hypothetical, but I'm going off the assumption if we're operating on last year's budget month to month to month, and we're continuing to operate on last year's budget, and we don't have yet a town meeting, so we can't vote on a new revised budget. That's where I'm just trying to understand if the tax rate would actually still be increased, or whether it would subject to Prop 2.5, or whether it would stay flat.
I think you're way ahead of the DLS, the DOR, the governor. I don't mean to be flip about it, but I don't. I'm unfortunately confident that state revenue will go down, and other and various other local receipt accounts will be affected, and we will have to reduce the budget to what can be balanced. And I can't say whether we would stay at exactly where we are today or something different. So it's just really hard to answer, Jonathan.
Blythe, Todd has raised his hand. He'd like to share something, I think.
Excellent. Go for it, Todd.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Oh, anytime. Jonathan, so with respect to the tax bills that are issued about August and November, those are preliminary tax bills, and they're based on the current year's tax rate. So that doesn't change. What would change would be the tax rate setting at the end of the year when we come to November, and that's based on the budget that is accepted at town meeting, whenever a town meeting is. We would continue on operating, again, on a 1/12 budget each month until we have such said town meeting. And that's how that would work.
Okay, I
Good,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. Thank you for the clarification. David, yes, you had a question.
I think I'm following up a little bit on Jonathan's first question. Blythe, you talked about how if it's a 1/12 budget, they can't, I mean, union contracts, et cetera, don't get carried. There's no approval for their raises. Do you have the authority, or the selectmen have the authority to hold back money under a 1/12 if there was something that either is in the proposed budget to cut a department? Do you have the authority to direct them not to spend money that's in their budget?
Well, on the town side, I would say the answer is yes.
Okay.
But I'm not immediately, and I'm gonna look to Todd for any input he's got on this that I'm not thinking of. There's really nothing new or different in our budget.
But not yet. Meaning it's still only the second week of April and the budget's still in flux. I understand what you're saying, but I just wonder if you have the ability to direct a department to hold back pending the approval of a future budget.
We've already started to do that. We have a couple of open positions right now. We're making no efforts to fill them.
Okay.
We've asked departments to eliminate any discretionary spending so we can try to end the year in as good a position as possible. We started to mention, utter the word furlough if there's any positions that are not being able to do any work at the moment.
Okay.
Some of those, there may be positions in, say, the schools or the library, but the selectmen don't have authority over those. So it's more of a conversation about how can we do what's best for the town and try to get everybody to work together to do those things. So I say the selectmen do have some, and I have some authority to say we're not going to do this or do that. And the 1/12 budget process will dictate that as well. But there are some departments where we don't necessarily have that latitude, and we try to work together, I think is
Thank
the
you.
short.
Once again, Todd wanted to share some perspective.
I put my hand down.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
It's okay, but I will share some perspective. So Dave, just if you rephrase your question so I can completely understand what it is that you're asking, because what I think you're asking is, how are we operating in July? Is that what you're asking?
If it's a 1/12 budget, what kind of direct controls do you have over departments during that sort of interregnum portion of the budget process?
So again, the 1/12 is based on fiscal year 20's budget.
Right.
We can only spend up to that amount. That's by state law. So we cannot spend any more. So we have to keep within those parameters. And, obviously we'll have, as we get closer to that time frame and we still don't have town meeting scheduled, or, there's nothing moving forward, department heads will have department head meetings and go over all this information with them so they're completely aware of what has to happen, especially, payroll on a going forward basis and things of that sort. And then once that's all settled and then we do have town meeting, what do we need to do in order to do retroactives and all that good stuff too as well. So yeah, that's in process, and that's a continuing thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
If I could ask actually a question across the meeting to Todd. Todd, do you know what happens with our pension assessments and, say, health insurance increases we've already been given? I mean, those are obligations are hard that we're not sure we can change.
Correct. And we would have to pay whatever those are currently. And then obviously we do a true up once we get the budget approved.
Okay.
So again, it's pretty much status quo. Nothing changes from fiscal year 21. We just have to do a true up once the budget is approved, if it said when we do approve it.
And Kristen, I think your question must have, or no, is your hand still up, Kristen? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I was, David, I'm trying to understand what you're asking a little bit. So is there a concern that if they're just given 1/12 to spend, that they could spend more than we need to with that 1/12?
If there was a proposed cut to a department in a specific account,
Mm-hmm.
a proposed cut in the proposed town budget, but we didn't have town meeting,
Mm-hmm.
could the department spend the amount that was in the line item last year for that 1/12?
Right. Like, could a department actually
Rather than-
benefit from the delay versus?
Let's pretend it's a 10% cut, right? I'm making this up, but the cemetery budget was zeroed out at one point. I don't know if it's going to be, but if they get a 1/12 budget with the cemetery account, are they going to bury some people in the month of July? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The only one I can think of off the top of my head.
Right. Like, is there a chance a department could actually benefit from the delay that was
Not even saying
not even benefit, you know what I mean? But
operate under, past practice with the understanding that the future was going to change. So
right, benefit's the wrong word, so I apologize, but I get
So
what you mean.
it's a good example. We have proposed to eliminate a part-time position in the IT department. It's unfilled at present. And some great candidate comes along. Yes, I guess if Todd and I didn't put the appropriate controls in place, someone could hire that position because it's the same budget as last year. So we're going to have to be careful about those things and make sure they don't happen, and everyone understands that they can't spend any more than they did. And when we get to being able to have a town meeting and we perhaps have further cuts we need to make because the revenue picture is clearer, it's even more important that we didn't spend what might have been possible left over from FY20.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Any other final questions from the committee on warrant articles? As I said before, I don't think we're in a position to vote on anything unless I'm missing something.
Well, I think that there's some very routine ones you could, if you wanted to get them out of the way, say Chapter 90 and grants and such. If we're able to stay on the June 9th timeframe, the plan is for the selectmen to review the updated version on Tuesday. We are waiting to hear from CPC, who's meeting simultaneously about adding an article to spend affordable housing funds for rental assistance. And so I would plan on May 5th to reopen the warrant to add that article. As you know, Arthur, I did ask Jay earlier today in an email if he wanted to consider a consent calendar just as a tool to move the meeting along quicker when we do have it. He wanted to wait and see. But otherwise, I think the goal is keep the warrant as straightforward and simple as possible so that when we have the meeting, it can be done in an expeditious fashion. So I don't expect any other changes other than the ones I mentioned to you tonight.
Okay, thank you. Susan, you had a question.
Yes, when you say we don't have anything else to discuss, I realize I was a couple minutes late. Are we not discussing the citizens petition? And if that's the case, then how are we moving forward on that? Because I feel like we should discuss it. We know what they're presenting. We should discuss it and have a consensus or vote on it, even if they have chosen not to come and defend their citizens petition.
I had also expected the moderator, Jay Talman, to join us tonight, and I don't believe that he is online with us either.
Is anyone in the holding room or the waiting room?
No.
So then, I mean, I would like to go ahead and discuss it amongst ourselves and the few town people that we've had to join in. I can see that there's people that are not on the board that are on the call or in the meeting. So I move that we discuss it anyway. We've tried for at least 2 to 3 weeks now to get some input, and we're not getting any. So if that's not going to move forward, then we should at least move it forward ourselves.
I would disagree
Yes.
with
I'm sorry, what was that, David?
that. I think we have to wait for both the moderator and the citizens to be on the call. It affects his power. I don't know why he's not here. I don't know why the citizens aren't here, but it directly affects his power. And if he can't be here for whatever reason, we can't have this conversation without his input. We also probably should wait for the citizens.
If,
I don't know why they're not here, but my point is,
But the citizens don't have to be here because anyone can submit an article for the warrant. We ask them to come and explain themselves to us, but they don't have to. It still stands unless they pull it. So we have to vote
I
on
understand.
it. I was explaining to David, we have to vote on it regardless of whether they show up. Right. But
So to me, it would be helpful to understand what collectively folks think. If everyone on the committee can go to the bottom of your manage member tab, there should be a yes and no button on the far left. Can folks please just weigh in on whether they feel it would be profitable for us to at least get the conversation started? I don't believe that Susan's suggesting that we vote, but I think Susan is suggesting, correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, that we at least start the discussion, correct?
correct.
Okay, so please, can I have a thumbs up and thumbs down by advisory committee members?
I'm not seeing
Weigh
that.
in. Again, it's on the,
Warrants up there, but
well, I don't think the warrant.
If you go
affects that.
to participants, there's raise hand, yes, no, and then under more, there's like a thumbs up, thumbs down, a clapping emoji. Want to give someone some props? Thanks.
It should be right next to raise your hand.
So we're doing yes or no?
it's not, yeah, right, yep.
I feel like I should make the Jeopardy sound or something, sing the music.
And just to be certain, I know what I'm voting on because I don't know if there were it's not a real vote, but because there's no motion, this is a real vote. This is whether or not we should start a discussion here about a topic and then come back to it at some other time to continue the topic.
Correct. Is it profitable tonight for us to initiate the discussion of the citizens petition without the petitioners nor the moderator to weigh in and give feedback at this meeting?
But just to clarify, so in a future meeting, they would have an opportunity to come and we might have to redo the entire discussion with them here.
Well, instead of redo, I think from that perspective, they could add things. There still might be things we could talk about tonight, which are helpful to get out. But yes,
Okay.
there is a danger of being repetitive. I want to be extra sensitive too, because our meetings are going rather numerous and rather long. I know this is an unusual time. We're talking a lot about exceptions, how budgets work given this unusual situation. I just want to be sensitive to people's time, and I want to make sure that we're using it constructively. So would discussion now and later be helpful on the citizens petition, or should we really just defer until later? So yes means you would prefer now, no means we wait for later.
Oh, excuse me. Arthur?
Yes.
I emailed Jay Talman and he said if we are discussing it, he wants to be here and he will chime in and he will join. My point is not here. I'm going to say this in the nicest way possible. I understand that by raising a citizen's petition that they should have the right to come and speak to us. We have asked them now repeatedly to join in. And as far as I know, unless there was an email that I missed, we were told they were coming tonight and then I've heard nothing. So unless I missed an email where it said they couldn't make it, they just have chosen to not show up for whatever reason and not to let us know. If Jay joins in and we discuss it this evening with Jay Tallerman's input, I'm not really sure why we need to wait for them. It is awesome if they come. And it is great if they come and give us their perspective on why they want to present this petition, but it's not required by any means. And
Understood.
they've had
Understood.
ample opportunity to do this. It's not like we are springing it on anyone. Ample opportunity to come.
Understood. Understood. So thank you, Susan. I think you've made your point. So thank you. Yes. And Jonathan, yes, you had your hand up, please.
Yeah, I'd actually like to shift what we're talking about a little bit. I think we're ready to take a vote. I'd make a motion to indefinitely postpone to vote to IP the citizens petition without any discussion.
Okay, just to get procedural here. So we're in the middle of talking about whether it's profitable to talk about the pros and cons of this particular article. Now we have a motion that says let's go ahead and vote on this citizens petition article. The proposal, the motion is to indefinitely postpone. So procedurally, do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. So that was seconded by Kiara.
No, Susan.
I'm sorry, Susan. My window decided to shrink. So I'm still. Oh, there we go. Make this close the chat. There we go. Everyone's back. Okay, so Susan seconded. Okay, so discussion before the vote. Please raise your hand. I believe Susan has articulated her point. Susan Klein. Were there any points you wanted to make? Well, okay. So let's just go with raised hands. Brian, go ahead and lead us off.
I'd love to hear some argument either for or against before taking a vote. So if maybe someone who proposed the motion or anyone could say why they want to IP this article, that'd be helpful.
Sure. Since I'm the one that made the motion, I don't mind stating my case. I think this is ludicrous from just the whole basis of it, right? The power of appointing advisory committee is delegated to the town moderator, right? Voted on by the town, and this is part of the responsibilities delegated to the moderator, and the moderator should have full discretion in terms of the people, the background, the career or the life experience, and the makeup of the board, right, of the advisory committee, full stop. I don't think that we as a town should dictate to the moderator whether it's specific college degree, specific career experience, or otherwise, for the moderator to make these decisions, right? And from my perspective, I kind of understand where these people who drafted this might be coming from in terms of we are a finance committee, so therefore we should have someone on this board should have finance experience. But it's just silly when you think about it. I mean, it excludes economics. Is an economics degree insufficient to serve that purpose on the board? I would argue an economics degree is just as valuable as an accounting or finance degree. There's no mention of economics. The petition is silent on what type of degree. Is it an associate's degree, right? Is it a bachelor's degree? Do we need a doctoral degree, right, in order to have this? As this is written, right, even if this passes, it will still, there's enough vagueness, right, and lack of specificity around degree, around the type of experience, and around the type of job. It will still be given to the moderator to make a determination based on his or her judgment. And if even with this, we're still asking the moderator to make that determination, then I don't understand the point of forcing this halfway. This should either be extraordinarily specific as to the type of degree and the type of experience that's required, right? Or it should be silent on all of it.
Okay, so thank you very much, Brian. David, you had your hand up. And then after that, I would like to go to the username JS King. I believe the moderator has joined us. But let's go ahead and finish with you first, David, then we'll go to Mr. Talman. David, go ahead.
I guess my comment would be I agree almost 100% with everything Jonathan said. However, and I agree with Susan that there's been an opportunity. We don't know the circumstances of why they haven't participated tonight. We do know last week they did apologize for not showing up. We don't know what's going on. This is an unusual circumstance, folks. They're not driving to town hall and walking into a room. They're not here. We don't know why.
Okay.
And Jay is now here, but he was not here when this article came up. This piece of the agenda came up. He was also asked to attend at 7 o'clock.
Well, Mr. Talman has joined us. I think we are eager for his perspective. Thank you for joining us, Jay. David, if that's all right, I'd like to go to our moderator.
Thanks, Art. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't recall getting the link to this meeting. I knew that it was going to be discussed. I know that Sue's had some technical difficulty. Thank you to Susan Klein for sending me an email and letting me know that it was being discussed. So I can be pretty brief on this bylaw. It is not the apocalypse, this bylaw, but it is not a good idea in my view. And I view it as kind of a solution in search of a problem. It presupposes that there's not requisite expertise on your board or the boards in recent memory, which I think is nonsense. There's been a tremendous diversity of opinion, of ideology, of expertise, including a significant amount of financial expertise on this particular board. So I really don't see that there's really an issue that would generate the need for this. I think the bigger point, though, with this proposed bylaw is that it overlooks the requirement of the advisory board to be more than just financial professionals. The advisory board, as you all know, and as is enshrined in both the law and our local bylaws, exists to review all town meeting warrant articles, not just the financial ones. And secondarily, I would suggest that to review even the financial ones, you need more than just the ability to crunch numbers. Even the financial articles themselves relate to matters that go beyond money and go to impact on the health, well-being, welfare of the citizens of Norfolk. I'll give you some examples that have guided my thinking on the appointments that I myself have made and that many moderators make to the advisory board. Several years ago, when I first became the moderator, we were in the midst of trying to plan for a new public safety building. And we had the police chief of Walpole was a Norfolk resident, and I thought it would be important for him to serve because he could critically approach the expenditure that was before us. I have appointed teachers to the advisory board because, after all, about 65 to 75% of our budget in any given year is for education. Their perspective is incredibly valuable. I have looked for construction professionals and engineers because we look at zoning, and it's important that people are there and with experience. I've appointed people who work in state government because interplay between state and the local economy and other bylaws is important. I have just recently appointed someone with significant experience in epidemiology in the healthcare profession, because after all, the budget that you're working on this year is going to have to take into consideration projections with respect to how the current pandemic is going to affect the local budget and our bylaws and everything else that you have to consider. So I think this is a bylaw that's a little myopic. I think it's unnecessary. I don't think it is for the greater good. I'm not sure what the motivation is behind it. I'd always be happy to speak with the sponsors of it if they have a specific concern that I could help answer. They've never approached me about it. I think it's a well-balanced advisory board right now that has a lot of different opinions, a lot of expertise. I wouldn't tinker with it by trying to narrow the focus that I have when I have to appoint the members.
Excellent, thank you. Susan, you had your hand up next, and I would appreciate any questions that folks want to direct to Moderator Talman.
Okay, well, I don't have a direct question to Mr. Talman, but when I spoke earlier, I didn't actually get to give my opinion on the content of the citizens petition. It was only about whether or not it should be discussed. And one point that I would like to, I'll be brief because Jay actually said, for the most part, everything that I was already thinking. There are tons of boards in this town, and most of them are not run by people with fields, with expertise in those specific fields. For example, the select board, the Board of Health, things like that. That doesn't say that there's not anyone on those boards that's knowledgeable, just like it doesn't say that there's not anyone on this board that's knowledgeable, but it does not speak to whether or not they have an accounting degree or whether or not they have a degree in health administration. Secondly, I don't know that I've ever actually asked anyone on this board what their college degrees are in. For example, I have 2 college degrees. I don't currently use either one of them because I chose to stay home with my children. That doesn't mean I don't possess those degrees. No one's ever asked me what my degrees are in. So how do you, anyone, whether they're a citizen who's presenting this petition or there's someone on this board or even Mr. Talman, how do you know what my degree is in? You don't. I like I said, no one's ever asked me. So I take offense to the fact that someone on this board doesn't have the experience that is necessary to manage the budgets, and whether or not we should pass a budget or propose a budget or give feedback. I think we do a very good job of giving feedback to people when they present their budget to us. We are a group of people who don't always agree, but agree to ask the right questions. I also would like to point out that in my understanding of the advisory board was it was supposed to be reflective of the citizens of the town, and we were supposed to take the information, process the information, ask the right questions, get the right answers, and then be able to present to the people of the town what the crux of the warrant articles are. It does not say anywhere that we should have a degree in business or accounting, nor does anyone in this town need such degree to be able to vote to approve a budget in the first place. That is my point.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan. I appreciate you sharing. Kristen, you've had your hand up. Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, I do wish the folks were here that wrote this, because I agree with everything that has been said. I am very curious. The phrase, something in search of a problem, a solution in search of a problem that Jay said was where I had landed is I would love to understand from them if they, watch this later and can come back at some point to understand what is the concern they have that this is solving, right? And I've thought a lot about this in terms of, I'm trying not to take this as an indictment of us or Jay or anyone in the current, kind of scenario here. I think with bylaws, you want to think about the worst case scenario. Say there was like a really terrible moderator who just appointed all of his or her friends, right? So, is that something they're concerned about? But the problem is we don't know what their concern is because they're not here. So I've been trying to give some benefit of the doubt here in terms of thinking about what could have been the premise. As someone that does work in finance, but does not have an accounting degree, because many people don't choose their career path until after they finish their undergraduate, if they even go. I actually I'm sympathetic to the premise of wanting some contingent of folks on what is essentially a finance committee to have that background. But like everyone else has said, I think this is both too narrow in scope and too vague in scope at the same time. I think it would be very hard to actually implement and move forward on as a moderator to use this in any real way. And I think it's, just too narrow to actually get to an understanding of what makes a good board member and what means that someone understands financials and accounting and business. So, that's where I kind of have landed. I do wish they were here because I would love to hear them explain a bit more about, where did they get these qualifications from? Is it from other towns' versions? I just want to hear more. It wouldn't change my vote, I'll say that, but I would like to hear more about it just to see if we could address this in a different way with those concerned citizens and either have it, kind of moved off or, addressed and refiled at a different time. What I did want to ask procedurally is we had a vote to IP this.
A motion. There's a motion to
There was
vote,
a motion to IP
and we're
this.
currently discussing it prior to the IP vote. Correct.
Right. So I think my question is, why would IP make more sense to those folks who are supporting IP versus us just voting up and down on this at this point?
That is our up and down vote. So to indefinitely postpone it is us to basically reject it.
Okay. Sorry, I'm still new to this. Okay.
No, that's fine. I mean, we could move to reconsider later, but
right.
That's the process.
Okay.
Brian, you've been waiting. Yes, Brian, go ahead.
I'll try and be additive to the discussion points that have been made and not repetitive. My concern with the words that are here is that if there were the implication, at least, is that if having a closer, tighter understanding of accounting and finance would allow us to be a more a higher performing board. And based on my time here, when we review the budget, we do ask questions, but we don't have the authority to make recommendations for budgets to be changed. It sounds like, and this year's a good example of that, that is actually what's coming from the select board in their interactions on making recommendations on numbers to hit. Our role is to make an overall recommendation on approval or not to town meeting. And I'm not sure that, given the scope of our authority as a committee, that this substantially changes what we can do, because we're not managing the finances and accounting directly, if that makes sense.
Well, Brian, just to jump in, and please correct me, Todd or Jay, my understanding is we actually do. We can change specific budget items, specific line items. We can put forth a budget in total, if we really went that far, or something specific for a vote at town meeting. So the selectmen can do their thing, we can do ours.
But sorry, Todd.
No, it's Jay.
I'm sorry, Jay. Is that any different than what we could do on any proposal? Is that unique to finance, or is that we can make an alternate recommendation to any warrant article?
So
I'll let Jay speak to that.
Yeah, let me just speak to that briefly, Brian. So Norfolk's a little bit unique. So first of all, under the statute that governs finance committees and advisory committees, you do make first and foremost recommendations. Those recommendations could be, however, for a completely different budget or different parts of a budget than the selectmen propose. So you do have the ability to side by side with the selectmen's budget. Yes, the warrant and the principal budget is in the hands of the select board, but the advisory committee does have the authority to make a completely different recommendation. Moreover, in Norfolk, the bylaw charges the advisory board with the obligation to make the first motion. So as it applies to the budget, omnibus budget, the finance committee would make the main motion. And if it differed, they could recommend the selectmen's budget, and in years past, most years past, they've been ultimately on the same page, even if there's been some grudging agreement on certain items. But if you parted ways with the select board, your main motion would be the motion. It could be a different dollar amount, because that's how our bylaw is written. The selectmen would then be in the position to have to move to amend your main motion if that happens. Again, it's been very rare when there's been that level of disagreement on town meeting floor. Leading up to town meeting, there's good history for wide-scale disagreement between the advisory board and the select board. But I just want to give a little context there. So it's kind of a mix of the two. You have significantly more authority and opportunity to arrive at your own conclusions on budgetary and other matters.
Thank you. That's incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification, Jay. So just to kind of recap that, if we're looking at a zoning article that says 50 yards and we think it should be 10, we just have to up or down vote the 50. If we're looking at a budget article that says $50,000 and we think it should be $10,000, we can actually make an alternate motion that says $10,000, just conceptually. Okay, I also have some input here on, I believe there was some miscommunication between Susan and the petitioner. This is Susan Jacobson, our administrator. So I do not believe that there was a complete confirmation of their arrival tonight. It seems as though it could have been crossed or mixed signals here. I've been texting Susan. I know she's actually multitasking tonight. She's also helping out with a different meeting. So I do not believe we're looking at a no-show. It's more complicated than that. Kiara, please, you've had your hand up for quite a while.
Thank you. So I am fairly new to this, so I apologize if I'm misinterpreting the context of this citizens petition. But one thing that concerns me, I know that Norfolk is a highly educated town, of course, but you know, putting in a requirement to possess a degree like this to become a part of the advisory committee, I worry that that could be, you know, trying to think about worst case scenarios, could be used as a reason to exclude certain people from the advisory committee. And I do think that, you know, the intention is that the advisory committee is similar to the makeup of the town. And so I don't know that we want to set this as a standard and have the possibility that it may be used as an exclusionary criteria.
Thank you, Kara. David, yes, you had your hand up.
One comment, Arthur, you said earlier that our motion to postpone is in fact a motion to say no, but we can in fact just simply propose at town meeting that the town vote no on this. We don't have to postpone it. We can request a vote down, correct?
My understanding is that we need to IP it, that is in effect no.
So let me jump in there a little, Art. So first of all, when I became moderator, I did change the practice a little bit with respect to petitioned articles. So first of all, for this article, I'm going to have to appoint a deputy moderator because I'm going to, if it hits the floor, I'm going to want to speak to it. But my position on the petition articles, even the ones that sometimes come across as a little bit far-flung, is that someone had the, you know, the guts to put themselves out there and petition an article. I usually let them make the first motion, so that would generally be a motion in the affirmative. And that would then put the, and I've done that since pretty consistently since I've become the moderator, that would then put the advisory board in the position of either recommending defeat or substituting with a motion to indefinitely postpone. But to David's point, you don't have to move to indefinitely postpone. You could move to defeat. I mean, there's any number of parliamentary mechanisms that you could apply to recommend the defeat of a particular article.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's helpful. So we do have a motion to postpone. One thing I would also, but before getting more into that, no other hands are up. One thing I would say is, again, the citizens petitioners are not here, just to kind of represent that perspective, which I don't know fully, but I had watched some the select board meetings, and I don't think the individuals were the same, but the sentiment that I heard expressed off and on was town budgets keep going up. Who are the people scrutinizing us? You know, we know that we have Todd, who's a financial specialist. That's part of our town government. But where is the financial oversight? Who knows enough to get down specifically into the weeds, deep transactions, and have enough financial context to push back, perhaps like propose an alternative? That was the sense that I had from viewing some of the earlier meetings that I think might have inspired this citizens petition. Brian, yes, you had your hand up.
Also, to stay additive on this one, I'd be concerned if there were two members that fit the that were like special membership positions with special topics, that when we got to financial discussions, that they would say, well, we're the ones who really know what we're talking about here and are the ones that are in, or even if it's not explicit, it may create a hesitancy for the full and open discussion and the full committee to have a robust discussion, because there would be almost a tiered situation on certain topics that I would be concerned about.
Okay, thank you. Susan, yes, you had your hand up.
Brian just made almost the exact same point that I was going to make. When they say how do I say this? When they say they want someone specific who can answer the questions about budget, is budget the only thing they care about? Because I seem to remember we had a huge discussion on whether or not, it went for a while on whether or not we should, on energy conservation. We didn't say that we only could hear from the person who has an energy background. We listened to everyone who had an opinion on whether or not we should be a green town and how we should go about doing that. That was if I recall last year, or the year before, that was almost a 2-hour discussion. I would have been very offended that evening had I not been able to have been heard, and we had only listened to the person on the board who has an energy background, or if we only listened to the person on the board who has a teacher background or an education background or a background in health administration. I think this is a slippery slope. I also disagree with the fact that they're saying it has to be the next 2 appointees. We have a moderator, and we put the moderator in charge of filling the advisory board for a reason. We should not be handing over when and how and who becomes a part of this advisory board to someone because they have, to the town or to the citizen, because they have a specific agenda when it comes to budgets. That I am not putting words in anyone's mouth. They have made themselves very clear based on numerous advisory and select board meetings that they have attended and spoken at. They have a specific agenda when it comes to the budget. That is what this is about. This has nothing to do with thinking that someone should be an expertise in any other field other than this.
Oh,
and I think this is a very slippery slope that we're getting into. And what Brian said is, I think that would cause a problem where we're only now listening to the person who has expertise in that field. And that is not what the advisory board is intended to do.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you. Mike, yes, please.
Well, independent of what we think, we're going to hash this out at town meeting, right? Because this goes on. So the point of course, we have to take an action. But I guess I want to think about, like, okay, how do what kind of arguments are we going to make at town meeting, and what do the optics look like? Because right now we look like a board that is trying to, keep our position somehow. So I don't know if there's an action. Of course, we have to do things the proper way, but I guess I just, the course I'd want us to think about is the one that makes us, state the opinion of how our board feels about this, but in a way that doesn't get completely sidelined and, why do we even have government or some other crazy nonsense in the middle of town meeting.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, yes, please.
Yeah, actually, this question might be best for Jay. When this goes to the floor at town meeting, are friendly amendments allowed on citizen petitions?
I would say that friendly amendments are always allowed, but they're more of the clerical nature. I tend to think, or something that no one would possibly disagree with. A regular parliamentary amendment is always possible, of course, where someone would actually have to make a motion to amend.
Okay. And then one other question, and forgive me for being extremely pedantic on this, but in the first mention of accounting and finance in this, those terms are capitalized, capital A accounting, capital F finance. And the second mention of them with respect to the job experience, it's lowercase accounting, lowercase finance. And my understanding of contracts and laws, capitalized terms have specific meaning. So my read on this is a degree specifically in either accounting or finance, say not economics, whereas the job experience is more of the accounting and finance in a generalized sense. So it could be anything to do with counting money. Is that a reasonable interpretation of how this would be codified into law?
I'd say that's about halfway to the way it would be looked at as a matter of law. I noted that too, Jonathan. And originally, when I first saw some proposals of this, I didn't see the benefit of the handwriting. So I thought, well, none of those things are definable at all just by saying it. But if you are going to capitalize a term in a contract or any other legal document, it means that it generally means, as you suggest, that it's a defined term. So there would then have to be a definition of it somewhere. There's no definition of accounting or finance here. So I don't know exactly, I think, and if reasonable minds could differ on what does finance experience mean, then the capitalization is meaningless. Because I think even amongst this group right here, we could probably disagree what that means. Accounting is a little bit more definable perhaps, but not necessarily. Do you have to be a CPA? Could you just be running the books for someone? An office manager? They're not defined, so it's not capable of definition. That would be an additional point I'd make, but I don't even want to get down into the weeds on that from my perspective as someone who's going to speak out against this, because that then just begets an amendment, and I'm not particularly interested in that. Like, can I, if I may, can I give also a little bit more context, because I think this follows up with something Mike said?
Sure, please.
So when several years before I became moderator, actually 2 moderators ago in Norfolk, there was a anti-property tax group in Massachusetts, quite conservative in nature, and I have nothing against that per se, but what they recommended is go out and run for moderator. They were looking for people who of their group to run for moderator and only appoint fiscal conservatives to your advisory board, because in most towns, the moderator appoints the advisory board or finance committee. And I started as a town council, and I go to town meetings and I see advisory boards and finance committees all the time. I started to notice that moderators, very politically motivated and ideologically motivated moderators, were running and spending a lot of money to run. And even in our own town, one of our more recent, actually 2 of our more recent moderators made a decided shift in the type of qualifications that they saw for advisory board members in terms of ideology. Now, they're free to do that. What I've tried to do, however, is look for diversity of opinion and diversity in approach to it. So I have never been wed to conservative and liberal, because I think those terms are meaningless when it comes to local taxation anyway. But I have, and I think you could look right around this call or this room, so to speak, and see a lot of diversity of opinion and ideology. And that's always been really important to me as a moderator, because I think it's more representative of our town as a whole and it gets for better debate. But if anyone had a concern with the level of expertise and qualifications of the people that I'm selecting for the advisory board, you know what? Find someone to run against me as moderator. That's the accountability. You don't like the advisory board for some reason, you don't think they're being sufficiently conservative or sufficiently liberal, then elect a new moderator.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Thank you. Let me just recapitulate where we're at. So we've shared perspectives on the proposal to indefinitely postpone. And again, Susan sends her deepest apologies, Susan Jacobson, our administrator, about the disconnect. I do not believe that either petitioner was confirmed for this evening. Yes, Susan, you had a question.
I didn't know if, I believe that Jonathan, I shouldn't speak for him, but I thought that the reason he was making the motion to indefinitely postpone is out of frustration of not discussing or having the ability for, at least 2 to 3 weeks in a row now to not even be able to discuss it. I'm not sure if that's the way he still wants to make his motion, or if he or someone else would like to make a motion to actually vote on it.
I'll clarify that.
And if we could.
I mean, while sure, it's frustrating that we didn't have a chance to discuss to them, my motion to IP this is based on the merits of the petition, not whether they've actually been here to speak to it. while it may be entertaining to speak to them about this, I can't envision any scenario in which it would change my position on this. So my motion to IP this still stands.
If we move to, I just have a question just before we vote, because I want to make sure I'm voting the correct way since Jay is here, he can answer this. If we vote to indefinitely postpone it, what does that mean versus us voting to just not support it at town meeting and saying that no, or if, I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak for all members, or if there are members who want to support it, we wouldn't know that until we voted, of course. But if we were to say vote it down versus IPing it, we recommend to the town that we're voting it down. How is that different than recommending if we're IPing it? I know what IPing means. I'm saying, should we be voting to IP it? Should we be taking a vote on yes or no? And I'm not speaking about for tonight. I'm speaking about for how we handle this at town meeting moving forward.
So it depends from a parliamentary perspective, how you want to approach it, the specific motion. In substance, an IP motion is a recommendation to vote down. We recognize a motion to indefinitely postpone as our motion for defeat in Norfolk, and I explain that before town meeting every time there's a town meeting. Every town has a slightly different approach to how they want to kill an article or dismiss an article. Sometimes it's motion to dismiss, motion to defeat, motion to table for the purposes of defeat. Different moderators, different town meetings do it differently. So there's really no difference. I take the spirit of Jonathan's motion to mean that you are voting against this. How it gets brought up depends upon how the petitioners want to bring it up. If the petitioners make an affirmative motion to approve, then the next person at the next group at the mic would be the advisory board. The advisory board has the option to simply recommend defeat, which is the same exact thing in substance as indefinitely postpone, or substituting the motion with a motion to IP. Either way, it amounts to the same thing, a recommendation against passage of this particular bylaw.
Thank you. David, yes, you have your hand up. And you're muted.
Hold on, there we go. Is there something about if you vote to defeat it, it can't be brought up for a certain number of town meetings versus an IP?
No, that's only zoning.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
One point that I would like to just share as I think through this issue. I mean, I definitely understand where people are coming from in terms of the merits. This is not a article that I'm inclined to vote for. Questions in my mind include, are there any qualification criteria for financial committees or advisory committees in other towns? I mean, does anybody put something this specific on this kind of appointment?
I've never seen one.
Yeah, so we're basically trying to create this very, I don't want to invent something that no other town has done. That's one point that I would want to make. And the other point I would want to make is procedural. Jay had a comment about, it does take a certain amount of guts to put forth a petition. Citizen participation is a feature of our form of government. I would at very least, if I did something like this, I would appreciate being heard. Even if something gets voted down as a citizen petitioner, if I lose the vote, at least being heard to me is what matters, which is why I really don't feel comfortable voting to support IPing until we've heard the citizen petitioner. So that's just my perspective. Brian, yes, you have your hand up.
Yeah, similar procedural question, which is, I know we've taken votes on warrant articles in the past and then gone back and had further debate or readjusted our vote on a particular warrant article. That's what I would like to clarify is, if we take a vote here, are we precluding further debate or hearing from the petitioner and potentially taking a second vote or reopening the vote at a later time?
Procedurally, no, we can vote to reconsider. We have done that, as you said, in the past. I'm just not sure what it says that we read an article, we are so biased against it that we say we're going to reject it until somebody gives us a reason not to. That I'm not sure that's deliberation.
Okay.
But that's just my opinion.
Well, if I can, and forgive
Please.
the bluntness of this comment, this is my
Please.
political statement here. I find it very ironic that we are celebrating citizen participation and their guts to bring this, to speak to it and support it, when the meaning of this is to limit citizen participation in government. The irony of that is just astounding. And again, that's the basis of why I would vote to IP this on the merits of it. And we struggle every year to get citizen participation. There have been committees to increase citizen participation. We struggle to get attendance at town meeting. We struggle to fill boards. And here in front of us is a petition specifically designed to limit citizen participation. I think the citizen petition speaks very clearly and speaks very directly to its intent. Again, I don't, as much as I would perhaps enjoy asking some questions about it, I truly don't need to hear the answers to vote on the merits of this petition.
Thank you. All very, very fair points, Jonathan. One procedural thing that I'd like to mention is I am interested in generally the following order, that, you know, we have somebody present, we ask questions, we also invite citizen comments. There are some folks who are in attendance of this meeting who have input, and then after that we vote. We sort of have the ideal of whatever that is, a bit out of order. There are some folks here from the community who have raised their hand, who I would appreciate the chance to hear what they have to say on this item. So having said that, Martha and Chris Henry, if you could state your name and address, I would appreciate your comments.
Hi, Martha Henry, 30 Boardman Street. I just would like to just sort of reiterate what I've heard from Jonathan and Kara. I think it's inappropriate to codify in our bylaws some specific degree that somebody would need on an advisory board. I think Jay does a nice job of explaining the importance of having a well-rounded advisory board, and that the notion that having a quote-unquote degree from whenever, from wherever, makes you more qualified to advise the town on various things, budgets and alike. So I think it is a slippery slope to put something like that into the law, and I think that we would be potentially shortchanging the town on expertise that people may have or experiences that they've had in their careers that would offer different perspectives. So I do think it's fair that a citizen who puts forth a petition has the right to argue that petition, but I think the fundamentals of this one seems a little ivory tower to me and not really appropriate. And I really worry about what that would do moving forward.
Thank you.
Shutting off the voices of others.
Thank you for your comment. Appreciate the input. I believe we have, just because this evening has a life of its own, we have Mr. Haddad, I believe, who is one of our petitioners, has joined us. Ed Haddad, are you with us? You are muted. There you go.
There you go. You know, I actually have Mr. Rand on the phone with me. Neither of I got a notice that there was a meeting tonight and that we were on the agenda.
Understood. We very much apologize for that. There was a mistake administratively. Some people were let known, others were not. Again, our apologies for that. If you have something to share, we would love to. If you have some context to then provide, if you're prepared, we're happy to take it now. If you do need more time in order to present, we will make that opportunity available to you later.
Well, like I said, I mean, I'm prepared to speak, but Mr. Rand is not on the call either. I mean, can we be put on an agenda at, let's say, the next meeting or whenever is convenient for your board? I mean, it's not like we're not prepared. We just weren't notified, and you know, it's kind of embarrassing at the 11th hour to be asked to speak when he's not even on the phone, and it's his petition.
Arthur?
Yes, Susan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Haddad, I want to apologize to you and Mr. Rand. The error was on my end.
I'm certainly not making excuses. It's been a crazy couple of weeks, and I thought that I had actually, in our correspondence, said this week. I have reviewed that, and I am mistaken, and I apologize for that mistake, that error.
Well, that's okay, Susan. I mean, you know, mistakes happen. I just, you know, want to say, how do we then fix this? And I don't want to speak, you know, for the sake of the board. I don't want to give you a lame presentation when we're kind of like scrambling at the last minute. That's what I'm asking, if we can be put onto another night's agenda, if that's convenient for you.
So yes, as a citizen petitioner, well, anyone who's supporting an article, we, the advisory board, can and will make time for you to come speak with us. Susan can make that happen in terms of the next available meeting.
Great,
Again, I want to give you an opportunity to be prepared.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, and like I said, we are prepared. We were prepared to speak. It's just that I want to make sure that we speak intelligently for your board. And like I said, Mr. Rand is not on the call. It's his petition, actually. So I'd like us both to be available.
Thank you. I appreciate you connecting tonight, kind of from out of the blue. And Susan will get with you to book the next available time.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay, and we have one more hand up before I get back to the procedural questions. Kristen, yes, please.
Oh, that was from a while ago. Just kidding.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, so we have a article petitioner who Susan, thank you, Susan, will work to get on the agenda. There is, however, still the motion to IP, which we, unless it's withdrawn, we need to take a vote on. I believe that Jonathan has made it clear that that he wants to continue. So are there any other discussions before we call the vote to indefinitely postpone the citizen petition article? Okay, so, and to clarify, those who are in favor of IPing, you would vote to yes to then indefinitely postpone, and those against would then vote no. I'm going to do a roll call to make sure that we get this recorded. Please have your pen ready, our trusty clerk. Okay, so the roll call vote. Kristen Baelish, yay or nay to indefinitely postpone?
Sorry, still new here. So if I would want to hear them speak another week and then vote, what would I vote on this?
Well, the question is, do you, well, you could technically vote to IP right now and just say, my decision today is to recommend that we definitely postpone this. And that could then later at a different meeting, somebody could then prepare a motion to reconsider.
I hate being alphabetically first.
I'm sorry. That's how I sorted it.
Arthur?
Yes, David.
You need a majority of yeses to have it pass. What if Kristen abstains? And I abstain and a number of other members abstain.
If we don't have a quorum, then, so my belief is that abstention means that they do not participate in the vote. We actually have to have, I believe it's 5 voting members. Otherwise, it'll have to be tabled until we have a quorum. Susan, yes, you have some perspective here.
So I'm not a member of the advisory committee, but where this was my error, although whether I agree or disagree with the petition as a resident is neither here nor there, but I do feel badly that there was an error on my end, if that helps anybody.
Thank you. I know you've said that multiple times. I really appreciate
know.
that.
I just feel terrible about it. So
I don't want you to, mistakes get made. I don't want you to have to, crawl on broken glass or something. We're all doing our best under a very unusual work from home, juggle around circumstance. I believe you actually had to leave your home and come into the office because your house lost power. So
correct.
Correct. We're doing the best that we can, all things considered. So yes, back to you, Kristen. You do have the option to abstain, which means not vote on this.
Okay. I will vote to IP.
Okay, so that's one yes vote to IP from Kristen Baelish. Brian Bichkowski,
No.
no. Arthur Franzak, I vote no to IP. Michael Huff. Unmute, Mike.
No to IP.
No to IP. Jonathan Hurwitz,
Yes.
yes. Jackie Katz,
Yes.
yes to IP. Susan Klein. You'll need to unmute, Susan.
Sorry, yes.
Yes to IP. David Lutz,
No.
Kiara Moore,
No.
1, 2, 3, 5. 5 no's and 4 yays. Am I counting that correctly, David?
Yes, you are.
So no's were Kiara, David, Michael, myself, and Brian. And yays were Kristen, Jonathan, Jackie, Susan. So it's 5-4, the motion fails. Okay, so procedurally, with that vote being done, David, you had a question.
After we hear from the other folks, we can have a motion to reconsider this vote, correct? The
Yes,
citizens?
it's not necessarily to reconsider. We just, yeah, we just make a motion.
After we hear from the citizens.
Correct. We can make a motion to approve. We can make a motion for whatever we want, or to IP. Correct. And Susan will work to schedule that.
Yes.
Were there any other questions that people had for Jay? I don't know if Jay's still with us.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions that we had for our moderator while he's with us? Okay, well, I really appreciate you coming in and helping out, Jay. It's a complex topic. I really appreciate you making yourself available. Thank you.
Actually, I have a question for Jay before he
Oh,
leaves.
Susan, yes.
It's not on the citizen position. Sorry, I thought you were asking specifically about the citizen position. Jay, I believe you and I had spoken about this maybe a month or so ago, but if they move forward with a June 9th meeting, because the state has lifted the gatherings restriction, but the meeting, how do I word this? I've spoken to a lot of parents and people, not just parents, but a lot of people who have said they would never attend a town meeting on June 9th. That's too soon for them. That's their position and their opinion. That doesn't mean that's what the government is going to recommend or that the governor is going to recommend. My question to you is, if the ban has been lifted and you are able to have a town meeting, but it is not well attended, say under 40, under 30 people, how will that affect how we vote? Will we still have a town meeting with so few residents, or will you call for a postponement, or is that something you'll have to make a decision on at the time?
So I couldn't call a postponement if I opened the town meeting for those purposes. We don't have a quorum requirement in town like some towns do. So I couldn't call it then. I personally can call a town meeting before it happens on the grounds of a health emergency. If I let people come, I couldn't then say, hey, we don't have enough people. That's not a health emergency. I think I would have a pretty good sense before the town meeting happened if it was going to be low in attendance,
Okay.
or if I just felt that it wouldn't be safe, in which case I would probably recommend to the selectmen that they take advantage of the new legislation and postpone it to a point beyond the start of the fiscal year, which they're now allowed to do. If they chose not to, I would do it myself. And I can do that for 30 days. They can do it. They have a little bit more authority than I do to push it further off, but I would push it at least 30 days. My feeling, though, as someone who follows this daily in my job, is that if we're in early June and there are still limits on gatherings and still enough concern that we should continue social distancing, is that the governor or the legislature is probably going to swoop in and provide some additional relief. But I'm taking a very close look at it. June 9th is, a month and a half away. And if we're right where we are today in terms of concerns about social distancing, then I'm going to push to have it moved again, at least another 30 days. So, and for health reasons, not because I'd be concerned about there only being 30 people there. If I felt it was safe and only 30 people showed up, then 30 people are going to make decisions for the rest of the town. But I think the two are so tethered together that I don't think that they would have happen one without the other.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jay. I'm now going back to our agenda here. We have covered aspects of the citizens petition, more to come the second half when that gets scheduled. We did go over the warrant. Was there an appetite for people to discuss or perhaps vote on any specific warrant articles? Opening the floor here, Kristen, yes.
I was just going to ask, Jonathan Smith is on the line. Hi, Jonathan, who chairs the Town Government Study Committee, which I used to be on with him. And I was curious if that committee had any perspective on the citizens petition or might have one before the next time we chat about it. I know this is kind of in the wheelhouse of what that committee was discussing.
Excellent question. Mr. Smith, anything that you feel comfortable sharing with the advisory committee? He is muted. Okay, Mr. Smith, are you there with us? Okay, so I believe well, I know he's not muted, but I think he might not be engaged here. Okay, well,
I can follow up with them if that's helpful for folks. I just know that
sure.
When I was on it, we discussed kind of, how hard it is to get volunteers on boards and kind of what, things we've already discussed around how making it harder is not a great thing. But just curious if they had any perspective to share and, if this got to town meeting, would they take a position on it, that kind of stuff.
Got it.
Looks like Mr. Smith's audio is online now, but he's muted.
Are you there, Jonathan Smith, Mr. Smith? Yeah, I actually unmuted his microphone. I can do that. It's a little. I'm not gonna turn on his video camera.
I didn't mean to call him out. As someone who attends other board meetings and constantly is in and out, I should have probably not done that to him. Sorry.
But no, that's fine. I will re-mute the fine gentleman here. There we go. Okay. Want to use my moderator powers for good here only. Okay, so we're discussing warrant articles. So hearing no discussion, I interpret that as the banana is too green. We want to wait for things to ripen a bit. The budget's too, Blythe, in fact, could you share a bit with, there's something that I'm trying to avoid, and what I would like to avoid is as as the town meeting gets pushed back, I don't want us just to fill between now and every Wednesday between when that meeting is going to happen with just incremental discussions of what's the latest for the week. I would like to have a critical mass of things in order to call a meeting such that we can make a decision or vote on something. Can you share anything from a schedule perspective that might help us concentrate?
Oh gosh, I wish I could. I think we're, as Susan pointed out and Jay weighed in on, we're all waiting to understand when the restrictions on groups of people will be lifted and when people feel safe to come to a meeting. So as I said earlier, I don't see any significant changes in the warrant. We've got some wordsmithing to do and decisions to make on the budget. The select board will talk about the budget next Tuesday. The budget that we're going to give them is the same one they saw 2 weeks ago. We do have an item on the warrant, on the agenda to ask them to make a decision, yes or no, about a change in retiree health insurance that we've brought up before, just to resolve that matter one way or the other. And if it resolved in a way to change the percentage, that would have an effect of lowering the budget. But after that, until we have a good understanding, any understanding of revenue shifts, I'm looking for direction from the board on whether they want to make any changes with or without that information. So sorry for the long answer, but I don't really have clarity for you.
Understood. Well, you know, if we don't know, we don't know. Would it be reasonable, and Susan, if you're still with us, Susan Jacobson, yes, you are. If we were to not meet on the 22nd, I don't think, do we have someone specific scheduled for next Wednesday, Susan?
No, the only person that we're going to bring in is on that special education fund. So we would bring in Dr. Alardi and the school committee, but we don't have to, there's nothing pressing that says we have to do that next week. And then to invite Mr. Rand and Mr. Haddad in.
Okay, so what I would like to do is I would like to combine the special education special request that they want to make with the citizen petitioners. If that can happen next Wednesday, that's great. If that, I mean, I think part of me wants to wait until the 29th, because at least then Blythe will have, that gives a full 2 weeks for things to firm up and settle when it comes to the budgets.
Right, and it'll also, CPC did vote tonight to move forward with an article that Blythe is going to present, that she's going to present to Blythe, and Blythe will present to the selectmen. So, you know, if the committee would like CPC and affordable housing to come in to speak to that, they could do that as well.
So how about we book for the 29th a budget discussion, just a general update on where the warrant's at, and the citizen petitions. Let's start off with the citizen petitioner. I would like them first in line. That I believe is some good business for us to conduct on the 29th. If we have more to vote on, then we can definitely do that, because we'll have a general just line item for warrant article discussion. Do any of the committee members have any input or comments on the schedule? Okay, going once,
Arthur, I might just
yes.
say that if we're not further along with the budget process, I think Blythe has a meeting. I know Blythe has a meeting next week that, you know, maybe we look at even bumping it out, because I think until she has some hard budget numbers, you know, we're going to be talking about the same old.
Okay. Okay, well, let's see where we're at. Please go ahead and put the agenda together for the 29th. If we need to push it further, again, I want to concentrate. I don't want us to just meet for the sake of meeting, although I do hope that the special education petition plus the citizens petition, those are two things that would definitely take at least an hour, I think, worth of discussion and consideration. So that seems like a critical mass from my perspective. Okay, now, on our agenda, we have discussed the warrant articles, the budgets, which is bringing us to minutes. Does our minute machine, has that produced anything, Mr. Lutz?
There's one set of minutes from the March 11th meeting that I sent to Sue. That was the meeting, oh my God, I reviewed them. Do you have them in front of you, Sue? Hold on, I'm sorry.
I do. I have them.
You got them right, hold on.
It was when we had the deputy fire chief.
Yeah, we had the
About
discussion.
the reserve fund transfer that we may or may not need. Blythe did some budget, talked about the budget a bit.
A long discussion about revenue issues.
Correct.
Jonathan began to raise the idea of, you know, being concerned about revenue shortfalls that were not anticipated when the revenue budget was put together. It was basically that meeting, and that's very little beyond the revenue discussion that was on the agenda. So I've reviewed them. They were pretty well put together, and they're ready to go.
Okay, I will entertain a motion regarding the minutes, please.
I'd like to move to accept the minutes of the March 11th, 2020 meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
That was Jonathan. Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, we'll do a voice vote. Please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, by voice vote, that is a unanimous acceptance of the minutes. Thank you so much for doing that, David. I really appreciate it. Okay, which brings us to the end of our agenda. So just to recap, I will confer with Blythe and Susan, and we will assume we're going to have the 29th meeting. That means I will work to get a link posted for that meeting on the 24th. I would appreciate people getting used to going to the town calendar site for what those links are. I just like us doing what the public does. I think it keeps us all on the same page instead of having a sort of separate stream of emails or whatnot. Please go to the event page for that link. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded? Somebody?
Second.
Okay. Motion to adjourn made and seconded. All in favor by voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
You too.
Good night.